To throw with has something to do with the size of your hands. If you've got, really big hands, you don't want to throw with a little tiny bit of clay because it's actually hard. But if you've got really small hands, you're just going to be spending all your time trying to muscle this ball of clay. So do start out with something, between 3 and 4 pounds is what I say in that assignment. But like 4 pounds is a pretty big ball of clay, so that should be the most that you want to use. The first thing I'm going to do is just pound it into a ball because I want the clay to be centered. The steps I'm going to do here, I'm going to center the clay first, then I'm going to open the clay, and then I'm going to pull up the sides. And centering is a matter of getting the clay round enough that my hands don't, that the clay is perfectly cylindrical on the wheel head. So I want to start out with something round, so I don't have to work that hard to get it to be rounder. I didn't used to do this. I learned my lesson. I do it now. Alright, and I'm going to whack that down in the middle of the wheel head. Again, as close to the middle as I can get. Most of these wheel heads are etched with concentric circles, so you can sort of tell if you're in the middle or not. And if you throw it down and you're not in the middle, get it in the middle. Just whack it around and push it. And get it as close to the middle before you start to center as you can, so that it's less work later on. Then I'm going to start to get the wheel going. The wheel needs to go fastest when you're centering, and each successive step you want it to go a little bit slower. But you need a lot of speed when you're centering. I'm using this wheel as a kick wheel, but it's also an electric wheel. There's a little switch under here and a foot pedal. If I push on that foot pedal, it'll make the wheel go fast. I learned to throw on a kick wheel, and I like throwing on kick wheels. I don't have one at home, but I just like doing this. so I'm usually demonstrating, and you ought to learn how to do it because it's a good skill to have. If you ever decide you want to do some other throwing and the only wheel you have available is a kick wheel, then you ought to learn how to do it. The kicking is probably a wrong word to use because it makes you think that you have to use a lot of force. But if you do that, what's going to happen is your leg is going to ricochet off this very impenetrable cement wheel, and it's going to bounce up here. And I used to get bruises on my shin all the time for whacking into this thing. So don't do that. I'm really just pushing it. I'm starting back here and pushing it. As I should, when I go slowly, I can push on the outside, but as it goes faster, my foot moves to the inside. There's some physics principle there, I'm sure. But my foot has moved to the inside, so that the wheel's really going quite fast. The downside to a wheel like this is that it slows down as you work on the clay, whereas these smaller wheels don't slow down. So I really urge you to try both of them. There are advantages and disadvantages to both. These don't slow down, but once you get to the really delicate part, if you haven't slowed the wheel down, it'll just tear itself apart. The pot will tear itself apart. So you actually want it to slow down at some point. But while you're centering, it's a little frustrating to have it slow down. So I would try both. They're both really good wheels. Okay. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start to refine the centering. Right now you can tell it's not on center because my fingers are bouncing all over it. So what I'm going to do is pull in with one hand and push down with the other hand. And what's going to happen is that's going to push the force down to the hard wheel head, and the force is going to come up. My clay is actually going to come up in a cone between my hands from doing that. As much as possible, my elbows are either going to be braced like this or braced on my leg like this, and my hands are going to be touching. Making that triangle between your hands and your elbows is a very strong, sturdy way to work with the clay. If you're doing this, it's going to push you all over the place. But if you've got yourself really well braced, it's probably not going to do it. So first thing I'm going to do is center. With my sponge. So I'm pushing down with my left hand, that's my strong hand. And I'm pulling in with my right hand, and it starts to come up. And you can see it slow down quite a bit because I have a big clump of clay on here.
The sponge is underneath.
Oh, under here? Yeah. Hiding place of all tools. So I'm going to bring it up into a cone. It's not perfectly in center, but it's better. You can see my hands are still kind of wiggling a little bit, but not nearly as much as they were. And then once I get the cone, my strength hand is going to move over on the top. For most of you guys, it's going to be your right hand, but for me, it's my left hand. And then my hands are going to be braced together like that. I'm just going to push down real slowly. Probably shouldn't use quite this much clay. Is it not working?
No, my pedal is stuck under the wheel.
Well, just, you know. Okay, that's better. It's harder to use when the pedal is underneath another one. So I'm pushing down, my hands are locked together, my elbow is braced on my leg here, and this elbow, since I'm leaning over a little bit, is just tucked in at my side, but I've got that triangle. If you ever look at like trusses when buildings are being built, you know, the roof trusses are almost always triangular because it's a really, really strong shape. So I'm just pushing down, this hand's holding it in. If this hand wasn't holding it in, the clay would just really mushroom out. So that's holding it in, but this one is pushing it down. I'm not using a lot of water. I put the water on when I need it, but I don't do this, like some potters I know, because the water just goes flying everywhere. And I don't actually want the water to sit on my clay any longer than it needs to. The water is your friend because it provides lubrication. It's a friction reducer, but if it sits on the clay too long, the clay just gets really wet and soggy, and you don't want it to be too wet. So I put a little bit on, I do what I need to do, and then I soak it right back off again. Funny sound. Is that your wheel, Leah? Oh, it's Thomas's, yeah. I knew one of those wheels made. Is that your wheel making that sound? Yeah. I don't know why it does. Okay. Alright, so I've got this pretty much centered. Now my hands can rest on the clay, and they're not wiggling, so it's pretty much centered. There's a little tiny wiggle in here, but I think it'll be okay. It's hard to know if your clay's in center when you first start out, but that's how you tell. If your hand is moving a lot, it's still not centered. Some well-known potter once said, if you have to ask, it's not in center. You know? So you'll know, you'll feel that it's in center more than anything else. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is open the clay. So I'm going to do this, and you'll see people, in fact, a few people in here do it this way, where you actually go in with your thumbs together and then pull back. That's a real traditional way to open, and it works just fine. That's not how I was taught. And if you haven't learned it any other way, I want you to do it the way I'm going to show you, because I think this is a better way. But that's just my own biases here. I'm going to rest, again, my support hand is just going to rest right on the clay, right by the middle. And you can see where the middle is because you're sort of making rings on the clay. Your hand is resting on there. So it's going to rest right on the middle. My strength hand is going to find the middle and go down first, and then both of my hands are going to pull straight back toward my stomach. So my hands are going to stay touching, and again, that provides extra steadiness and strength. So it's really a two-step process. The first one is I'm going to go down. Once I find the middle, I'm going to go down. By the way, if your finger's doing this, you're not in the middle, so stop pushing down. You know, you need to go back, center back again, and then find that middle again. Go kind of slowly till it really is more of a feel than it is a visual thing. But if your finger is going all over the place, you're not in the middle. So I'm going to go down first, and I'm going to stop about 1/2 inch from the bottom. Feel free, by the way, to ask a question anytime if you want to know more closely what I'm doing. I've done this enough that I have a pretty good idea. It's snowing again. A pretty good idea of how thick the bottom is. But if you don't know how thick it is, stop the wheel, take your needle tool, and stick it in there and measure. I know the bottom is too thick, but when I pull it out, it's obviously too thick. It's about twice as thick as I want it to be. So, and don't worry about that little hole because it'll just fill right in when you start throwing again. So I'm going to go back down a little further. And then when I know I've got the thickness that I want, 1/2 inch is a good thing to aim for right now. That will change as we do different things to the clay, but for right now that's a good target to have. So I'm going to go down until I'm about 1/2 inch from the bottom, And then I'm just going to pull straight back, kind of slow and steadily, to make the opening bigger, so I can get my hands in the pot that I'm making. There's a little bit of wobble in there, so I think I've got an air bubble I didn't get rid of. So don't pull it back so much that the inside edge overlaps the outside edge. That's too far. So you just want to go just enough so that you can get your hand inside the pot. Right now we're making cylinders, because cylinders are harder to make than molds. So if you can make a cylinder, you can make just about any other shape. So that's why we don't want to open up too far. I'm going to open a little bit more, because I didn't go down quite far enough. And then I've got this wobble in here, so eventually that's going to show up in the sides of my pot, and then I'll show you how to trim that off. I like to reshape my clay. Nobody taught me how to do this. It just works pretty well for me. I like the clay to sort of be leaning in, kind of like a cone, an open cone. So that's what that little move is about. And you know, you can do that or not, but I like each step to be completely ready for the next step. Another thing you may see me doing all the time, I'm always running my finger down here and getting any wet clay, because wet clay will form down here since your water's running down the side of the pot and just sitting right there. This is going to get really wet. If you try and throw with that, it's just going to come off on your sponge. So I'm always getting rid of that extra clay, and also I'm always wiping the wheel head and cleaning the water out of the inside of the pot so that it's dry.